Welcome, everyone. This week's parsha is Parshat Netzavim, which is one of the last parshiot in the Torah, since we'll finish reading by Simchat Torah. Usually, Netzavim is connected to Vayelech, the next week's parsha, but because of the way the calendar falls out, there's an extra Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and so we read the Vayelech next week. So Netzavim is a short parsha, and it's the beginning of Moshe's last speech. All of Sefer Devarim is thought of as Moshe's final words, but it's split into 4 sections. And so this is the beginning of the 4th section, which is why we see him sort of saying hello again, right? Which is kind of funny, given that he's been talking the whole time. So in the first 2 psukim here, right, Moshe says, "Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem." All of you are standing together, lifnei Hashem Elokechem, before Hashem your God. And then Moshe sort of further delineates, almost like you can imagine, like a big dinner when you say, thank you to these rabbis for coming, and these partners, and these parents, and the alumni, right? Moshe says, I see all of you, right? I see Rashechem, Shiftechem, Ziknechem, Beshotrechem, right? Your tribal heads, your elders, and your officials. Kol Ish Yisrael, all of the householders of Israel, Tapchem, Shechem, your children and your wives, V'gercha asher b'kerev machanecha, and the stranger, the ger, the convert who's within your camp. And then he adds this interesting phrase that is not common, right? All of those in some sort of form or another are pretty common. We say sort of a version in Kiddush, we say a version in Shul during after the Yikum Porkans, the Mishaberach. But this is sort of a new piece where he says, Mechotev atzecha ad shoev meimecha, from your wood choppers, the people who chop your wood, to the people who draw your water drawers. And this phrase is very confusing to most Mefarshim, and no one can really come to a conclusion on what it actually means. So I wanted to look through 2 or 3 different ways of thinking about the wood choppers and the water drawers, and what we can take from that for this time of year, this week's Parsha, Shabbat in general. So the first translation is probably the most straightforward, right? The Chizkuni tells us here that your chotev etzecha zeha evet, these are your male servants, and then the water jars, shoev meimecha, zo hashivcha, these are your female servants, right? So for the Chizkuni, probably it's harder to chop wood than draw water, and so he divides them out as male and female servants, and it's simply like a category of profession. And it makes sense, sort of when you think about the list, right? Moshe starts with the greatest leaders and then sort of wanders down the line until he gets to the unskilled laborers, which is sort of how I would think about these categories. And I don't think they have to be thought of as menial. I was sharing this thought with my mom yesterday, and she said, "What does it mean, just unskilled laborers?" And I think it's a really fair point. We were talking about how it was those people, those unskilled laborers, that really held us together during COVID, in addition to very skilled laborers like doctors, like Dr. Monica. But the people who are willing to still work in the grocery store and deliver Amazon packages, and all the things that we didn't want to leave the house to do, someone had to do them, and a big class of those people were unskilled laborers. So, not meaning to put them down in any way, I think the Chizkuni is simply noting that's sort of the class they've fallen in society, which is sort of maybe just a foundation. I wouldn't even say that's really so interesting. What is interesting, I think, in sort of layering on top of that is the Mishnah Torah. The Rambam, not specifically commenting on this week's parsha, right? This is in his legal code, the Mishnah Torah. He says that Gedolei Chachmei Yisrael hayu mehen chotvei etzim umehen sho'avei mayim. That the greater sages of Israel included wood choppers and water jars. And we do know that is true. In the Gemara, it sometimes talks about how certain sages' fingers are dirty from the tanning process, which stains your hands, or they were just dirty from, shoveling out ashes or being an ironsmith. So we know that most Torah scholars had to support themselves the wealthy ones were sort of the exception to the rule. But it seems like there's something about this idea, like this pasuk, that really caught the Rambam. And I think if we do take it in relation to sort of from the greatest to the least important, maybe is the way to say it, of the people in Israel, the Rambam is saying, no. Like this job might seem like it's going nowhere, but you could in fact end up being a Torah scholar. Like I saw it as like this reassurance. It doesn't matter what you start as, because it's sort of what you end up as that matters. And there's a path to be a Torah scholar, from everyone. For everyone. But I think that it even goes deeper than that, because, and also the blind people, sorry, I did not count them because they're not relevant to our current conversation. But then he says, "V'af al pichein," even though they were unskilled workers, they could, oskim b'talmud Torah bayom uvalayla, that they learned Torah all the time. And I think that's a huge piece of it, right? Is that like, and thinking about this time of year, right? It's like very easy to find reasons, I do it all the time, why I can't do something, whether like whatever the sort of ambitious thing is, whether it's learning Torah or learning something, a new skill or working out, right? I'm like, I'm too busy, or I'm too tired, or I have too many responsibilities. And I think that what the Rambam is saying is, if you don't allow those things to get in your way, right? I haul wood all day, I'm exhausted when I get home, or I have blisters on my hands from carrying the water buckets, I can't possibly learn how to knit now, right? That even despite, the Sephardia added difficulties, right? The difficulties of doing these professions, they were still able to find the time to be occupied in Torah. And then I think the sort of, when you circle back up to the top, the understanding is that even though they were busy, because they found time, they became the Gedolei Chachamei Yisrael. And so I think we could see the wood drawers and water choppers as like signs of great potential in all of us, right? We can choose. And there's nothing wrong, right? I do want to be careful. There's nothing wrong with simply being an unskilled laborer, and that's wonderful. But if you want to be something else, I think that what the Rambam is telling you is you could be anybody you want to be, and that's like a very empowering message that comes from him. I want to pause for a second and then shift direction. So any thoughts, questions? Okay, so I want to go in a totally different direction. The Mehashiluach is the Ishbitzer Rebbe. He's a great Hasidic master. And so of course he has like a totally different perspective than these sort of more traditional commentaries. And it's very long, and I don't want to get lost in it. So I think what we're going to do is just, and this is like a sad thing of this source sheet. I don't think I could bold here, but let's see. I want to get to, so let's say that the Mehashulach is no longer defining these categories as occupations, like as literal categories, but as characteristics that come out in all of us. And the Ishbitzer also sort of recognizes the list might go from greatest to least great, but he wants to make room for the characteristics to be either great or bad. And so there's two ways of looking at the list. So this first way here, he's sort of, I don't know the right like poetic term. I think it's chiastic structure, right? He's done like A to F and B to E and C to D, right? So he sort of matched them up on either side of the line, so that the wood choppers are now juxtaposed to the officers, right? And the water jars are juxtaposed to the householders of Israel. So they're no longer a bottom category, but everyone sort of muddles in the middle a little bit. And what he's saying here is that those who are wood choppers have great anger chopping wood, right? Like that the gvura of chopping wood, the strength needed to chop the wood, can be channeled as anger. But anger also can equal the fear of God, right? So on the one hand, you have these wood choppers who have this brute strength, and strength could be anger, right? You could imagine like the sort of violent way that you chop wood, or it could be channeled into yira, into fear. And so here the Ishbitzer is saying, right, just like the officers have fear of God, the wood choppers also have fear of God. And then the water drawers, right, has to do with love, because water is compared to desire. He's pulling this from the Tanya, which is talking about how water nourishes all the things that we desire in the world, right? Like food and drink and animals and livestock and all of that. And so for the Tanya and I think for the Mei HaShiloach, there's sort of like a negative connotation to this desire, right? It could be this sort of materialistic, like greed or an appetite that's too great for food and drink and things like that. Or it could be desire for God, right? Love of God. And so here, of course, right, the wood chopper is the person who represents Yirat Hashem, the fear of God. And the water jar is the person who represents Ahavat Hashem, because the Bnei Israel so much desires, right, Ta'avat va'ahavat Yisrael hu laHashem yitbarach, the desire and love for God. And so I think here for the Mei HaShiloach, right, he's saying being a wood chopper and a water jar is really just a way of saying finding your strength, your way to get closer to God, whether it's through yira or through ahava, which I would say is like sort of the full gamut of the emotional range, love and fear. But of course, he sort of can't stay away from this idea that maybe the water carriers are the ones who have the least fear of God, or I would say they use anger, right? And anger sort of distances you from God. And that the water jars are those with the least love of God, or maybe they're the ones who use their love in that materialistic way and not the way to come closer to God. So I think what I like about the Mei HaShiloach is this idea that any characteristic that we have could be used to get closer or further from God, right? Gvura and Ahava both have that capacity, and that each of us could be the water jar or wood chopper, however you think about it. You could say, I'm like the water jar who has trouble staying away from the material qualities of the world. Or you could say, I'm the water jar who inspires every household in Israel to love God. Right. And like that desire gets channeled into this pure divine love that gets us closer to God. Or similarly, of course, with the wood chopper, right? Either my strength comes off as like this scary, angry thing, which distances me from other people or from God, or it comes off as this fear, this reverence, right? Is I think maybe the word there that brings us closer to God. So far, I think that what we're saying, right, is that the water jar and the wood chopper are sort of similar, right? Either the Chizkuni saying their profession is similar, or the Mei HaShiloach is saying their character, right, is sort of similar in some way. But the Iturei Torah, which is a very modern commentary, so I could not find him on Sefaria. He's a politician in Israel. I think he passed away in maybe the 80s or 90s. I was reading his son's blog, and his son faithfully reports what the Iturei Torah says. It's not here, but I'm going to tell you that he points out that the way that the words work in our pasuk, I'm going to come back here, this idea of the may ... right, ad formulation, from to, right? May chotev etzecha ad shoev meimecha, from your wood choppers to your water jars. That sort of, I don't know if I'm being clear, but the formula of from the greatest to the least, from the king to the soccer player, however, that formula is usually meant to highlight differences, not similarities. And so there must be something different about them. And if there's something different, what does that mean for us? So we're no longer going to say they're both servants. That's too similar. It has to be something a little bit different. So the Netziv, the Emek Davar, wrote in his commentary that the Chotev Atzecha is your hard workers, right? It's really hard work in your house. That sort of lines up with the Chizkuni, right, in some ways. And that your Shoev Meimecha are your Shehi HaKala B'yoter. It's the easier job in your house. So one is hard and one is easy. But what I think is the key, and that matches up with the Iturei Kesef, the Iturei Torah, is Kol Echad Nadun Lefi Avodato. Everyone is judged according to their own work. It's almost like how we tell our kids to keep their eyes on their own plate at dinner, right? Like one person has to eat the whole ear of corn. One person just has to try it, right? Everyone is judged according to their own work. Some people can be really good water drawers and some people can be really good wood choppers. And we don't judge the water drawer by his friend, the wood chopper, and vice versa, because everyone is able to do what they're able to do in life. This reminded me of a magnet that someone got me once, which inappropriately or inaccurately attributes this quote to Abraham Lincoln, but it says, "Whatever you are, be a good one." So I researched it yesterday so that I could talk about it, and I discovered Abraham Lincoln likely did not say it. I'm gonna have to pull up the name of the person. It is an English author, and I'm probably going to pronounce his name wrong. His name is William Makepeace Thackeray. I think that's what his name is. And he, hold on. The story is told about him by someone named Lawrence Hutton. Lawrence Hutton is like a magazine editor and an author on his own right. And he shares the story that he remembers meeting this novelist, this English novelist, Thackeray, I'm not sure, when he was a child. And the novelist asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. And Lawrence Hutton blurted out, "A farmer." And then he was immediately embarrassed in his recollection because that's not what he wanted to be. He didn't really know why he said that at all. And he felt like, I think he probably felt like Thackeray, sort of to the point about, unskilled laborers, would judge him in some way. But he remembers that Thackeray just patted his head and said, "Whatever you are, try to be a good one." And so Lawrence Hutton remembers that he took Thackeray's advice to heart, and whatever he has been in his life, he's always tried to be a good one. And so if we think about the Emek Davar in combination with this sort of modern catchphrase, I think that what Moshe is saying is, listen, Bnei Israel, you're all here today. Maybe you see yourself in the categories I listed, leader, officer, household owner, ger, stranger. Maybe you didn't. But you can be whatever you want, and whatever you are, be a good one, right? Whatever you are, make it be something that draws you closer to Hashem, that makes you a better community participant, right? Just do the best you can, right? Is sort of the way I would think about it. And I think that there's something beautiful about that, right? It's almost maybe the flip side of the Rambam. We don't have to strive to be things we aren't. We can simply be the best thing that we are. Maybe like the Jewish story instead of William Thackeray's, that story about, I can't remember the names of the characters at this moment, right? But in the Gemara, it says that someone is on his deathbed and he's worried that when he gets to Shemayim, to heaven, that God will say, "Why weren't you more like Rabbi Akiva," or whoever it was? And his teacher comes in and says, "Don't worry, he's just going to say, why weren't you the best Mar Zutra you could be," or whoever the character was in that story, right? And so there's something powerful to that as well. But I think the last thought that is maybe the most accurate and sort of the least mysterious is to say that what is mysterious to us was probably just obvious to Moshe's audience. There are a few different texts. One that is commonly cited is a Ugaritic poem from the 15th century BCE that uses the very same language of from woodchopper to water drawer to talk about the whole of a community. It's like a sort of sad, gruesome story, so we won't go into the details. But it's possible to understand that this was sort of like a common phrase, and Moshe was using the vernacular of the time, right? Like from A to Z, or say like using the like, oh, anyone could do it, even John Doe, right? It was just sort of a phrase in the ancient Near East at that time to describe a whole population. And in that way, it's not judging or not judging a status or profession or a characteristic that you might have or might not have. I think that here Moshe is saying, you are all here, right? We are all here together, each and every one of us, standing together. And it doesn't matter what happened yesterday or who felt left out or, who makes it into the land of Israel or whose kids make it into the land of Israel. Like for right now, we are standing as one whole unified community. And so I think that brings us back up. What Moshe is saying is like so holistic, right? Because we are kulchem, we are all here together and we all bring our unique characteristics to the table. But I'm going to finish by really saying kulchem again in this other way, right? And so we're all here together. Don't forget your individual gifts and characters and professions and all the things that you can make our community all the richer with. But at the end of the day, those distinctions are less important than kulchem, than mechotev eitecha ad shoev memecha, because that's how we're going to get into the lands of Israel, is by all coming together. And so thinking about this week's parsha in relation to Rosh Hashanah, there are lots of different connections and tie-ins, but I think it's possible to say, right, we're going to hear this on Shabbat, and then pretty much 24 hours later, we're going to go back to Shul on Rosh Hashanah, and that we sadly won't be at the AOM. We're going to Chicago for Rosh Hashanah, but when you look around the room, right, to feel both the kulchem, you are a part of something bigger and something that is beautiful in its unity, and you are your own chotev eitecha or shoev memecha or any of the other categories. And what can you bring to make the community more beautiful, to enhance davening, to strengthen our connection to God as we stand there on Rosh Hashanah, and that both of those are within our reach, per Moshe. I welcome thoughts, ideas, questions, baby coos, all the things.
I think that's really lovely and like a great message for going into Rosh Hashanah.
So. Thank you, Elizabeth. I always count on you to know I'm not just yelling into the void. I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording. Oh, so many people. Hello, Florence. I didn't see you when you came in. Nice to see you. Hello, Mark. Hello, Sam. That's so fun when you stop the share. Okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording before I keep talking to everybody.